All of us are on a journey, and sometimes we get stuck in life, and that might lead to a breakdown. A breakdown is usually about a loss of some kind. And if you slow down and learn from your breakdown, you will have a breakthrough. Pay attention to the pain and the lessons. I decided to create Women Empowering Women due to my own breakdown and breakthrough in 2012. In these episodes, women will share their personal stories, how they went from a breakdown to a breakthrough, and what they learned in the process. I hope you will tune in every Friday on NewYouTV, and I hope these stories will inspire you. Debbie Adame was born in Queens, New York, the second oldest of 5 siblings. At the age of 6, the family moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where they lived for 5 years. Later, the family moved to Houston, Texas, where she grew up and went to school. After 10 years, the family once again moved, this time to Atlanta, Georgia. Debbie married at 21 and had a son, and 4.5 years later had a daughter. There were signs of verbal and mental abuse in her marriage, and in November 2007, she was diagnosed with stage 3A breast cancer. During her battle with cancer, the verbal and emotional abuse got worse, and it even started involving the kids. Debbie and her ex finally divorced after 22 years of marriage. This is Debbie's story. Well, hi and hello, and welcome to this episode of Women Empowering Women. And today we're going to talk to my good friend Debbie Adame here, how she went from a breakdown to a breakthrough.
Absolutely.
To a breakthrough. So we're going to discuss a little bit of domestic abuse, verbal abuse, and also we're going to dip in a little bit to breast cancer too. So it's a little variety show today, right?
Right.
So anyway, so we're going to start with Debbie here, and you were born in New York and
Right.
moved down to Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
And then you popped over to Houston. And
Right.
then
to Atlanta. So yeah, I've been kind of all over the country.
and that was because of your dad's work.
Right, because of my dad's job.
Yeah.
Definitely. And in Georgia,
It's okay.
yeah, okay, I can cut that.
Yeah.
But anyway, in Georgia, when I moved there, I was
Approximately what year was that? Did you move
that
to Georgia?
was in 1986. So I was like 20 years old at that time.
Okay. And you lived in Atlanta, right?
Right, in Atlanta, just a little bit north of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And
I also lived in Atlanta for 10 months.
woo, nice
Yes.
place. It was pretty.
It is nice. It is
I
nice.
enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it also, yeah.
But,
I didn't have to toss that in.
but I ended up working for an insurance agency, and my ex's uncle was a CEO of this insurance agency. So my ex would call and speak with his uncle, and then during the times that he would call, he started flirting with me on the phone, and I thought, oh God, who is this guy? And then
He was
eventually,
one of those charming.
yeah, he was,
guy.
trying to tell me all these compliments. You sound cute and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought, oh Lord, what kind of guy is this, And then eventually he was saying, well, maybe we should get together and go out. And I turned him down for like 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And he started leaving love notes on my door.
Ooh.
At the office. So, all the girls, oh, Debbie's got a love note, kind of thing. And
So you're doing a little bit of we call it love bombing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's not a good sign, but we know that now. We didn't know it back then.
We didn't know it back then. Because back then you're thinking, ooh, this guy really likes me.
When you were 20 years old.
Yeah.
We don't know a whole lot. We learn.
Yeah, we learn, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally said, okay, I'll go out with you. Well, then at that time I probably knew him on the phone and seen him. He came up to the office a few times. So that was probably about 6 months. And then we started going out, and then 6 months later we got married. So I knew him for about a year, and then we got married.
You got married. So that was pretty quick.
Yeah, it was,
Pretty quick. And you were in love.
Oh, yeah, I thought I was,
We do stupid things when we fall in love.
Yeah, we do.
Looking back on it, no, we were so in love.
Yeah, so in love.
But he was a nice guy. He was maybe just a little...
Yeah.
A little
he
bumming
seemed
and
like...
just intense, maybe.
Right. And, I think what really got me is that he really loved his mom. His mom passed away from cancer. And, I guess I felt sorry for him, so to speak, I thought, oh,
Yeah.
he loved his mom, and I always heard, guys that love their moms will treat their wives good, so I thought, okay.
But you had no proof that he did love his mom, because you never
No,
never
exactly.
saw him around his mom.
Right,
Yeah,
she passed away before we even met, so.
Yeah.
But
he told you, maybe looking back on what you wanted to hear.
I think so.
Yeah.
I really think so.
Played a little bit.
It did, exactly. And then we got married in '87, and then my son was born in '89.
Mm-hmm. And you were like 21 when you got married, correct?
Yeah, I was 21 when I got married, and I was 23 when I had my son.
Uh-huh.
And then I was 27 when I had my daughter. And actually, in hindsight, when I think about it, when my son was 3,
mm-hmm.
I actually when he was 2, kind of think about it when I look back, I saw signs.
Like what kind of
like
signs?
Verbal abuse. Like he would say things that were kind of mean to me.
Oh, to you?
Yeah, actually to me, now that I think about it. And they were kind of mean to me.
So what did you do?
I just kind of brushed it off, because I'm the kind of person, I don't like to fight. I hate to fight. So I would just like brush it off, thinking, okay,
he's tired. He had
a rough day or whatever.
So you just kind of
pushed it off. And then but then it was getting to be too much. And actually, when my son was 3, I was actually looking for apartments and was going to move into an apartment with my son.
Was he abusive to you verbally abusive to your son also?
No, not at that time.
It was to you. Okay.
Yeah, it was me that he was, kind of throwing little barbs out and things like that. And then my son was, like I said, around 3, and I was looking for apartments. And then later I got pregnant with my daughter and found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and I thought there was no way I could take a young child and a baby and do it on my own. So what did I do? Stayed for the kids, right?
Yeah. So
one of the worst things to do.
Yeah. So you were kind of stuck in a way. You felt stuck.
Right. I felt stuck. And then in 2001, we moved to our own house out in the country.
And you're still in
Atlanta.
Yeah,
still in Atlanta. And it just seemed like, not really overnight, but it just seemed shortly thereafter, he was getting so obsessed with building things around the house, like putting a patio out there. And I had a real pretty flower garden, and he was getting obsessed with, doing things in the yard and building buildings out in the yard. And
do you know why?
No, I mean, I knew he had, pride in, our own home and things like that. And I understand that. So my son was, say, 12 around the time that I started seeing really the bad side of him come out.
Was he very particular about the way he looked and how he presented himself?
No,
he wasn't.
That was the thing that kind of threw me off, because he didn't care how he looked. He started gaining weight. I mean, gaining a lot of weight, and not really caring. And his self-esteem was always low. And my job required me to work out of town, so he started accusing me of sleeping around, which I'm not going to use the other word, but
please don't.
Yeah, he was accusing me of sleeping around, and then he would always say things like, "Oh, you're probably just going to leave me and marry someone else that's better looking than me, or that has more money than me," and this was just like mind games all the time. Manipulation for me to feel sorry for him, because that's actually how he got me to marry him. I was feeling sorry for him.
Because of his mother, yeah.
Right. So this manipulation was really starting to show.
And bottom line, they have a very low self-esteem. And
right.
It sounds like maybe he had been projecting onto you that about cheating on him. And do you feel like maybe he was cheating on you?
I don't think so, but I think that was a fear, and he was just lashing out at that fear, because I was gone every other week, and he was feeling like, well, I wasn't good enough, and, this, that, and the other. And I constantly had to say,
validate him.
Try to validate him, right. Yeah. Because I was making more money than him.
You were the breadwinner.
I was the breadwinner. I was the breadwinner. And, I guess he felt like he wasn't man enough. That didn't bother me. I'm not a materialistic person. I never was a materialistic person, but he just seemed to have that stuck in his head. And it started becoming about the money. I mean, the control. He would literally, I got paid once a month at my company, and he would literally go with me to the bank, have me withdraw my paycheck, and he would give me $100 for the month, and then supposedly pay all the bills. And then all the bills were in my name because of the credit.
Mm.
I would start getting phone calls of.
One of his brother with my first husband. I'm sorry, I just had to say that. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, with the control with the money, and then the control.
I know.
The control with the money came.
Yeah.
And
but it's always about control.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So then, the manipulation, and then I was getting calls from creditors about the bill. So, that was another way of controlling. And then when I would ask him, what is the money being spent on? He was screaming, yelling. Here again, become more verbal abuse, and it just.
He didn't want to let you know, or do you think was he a drinker? Because
he wasn't a drinker. He wasn't into drugs. I don't know what he was.
Fast women,
but
fast cars.
But he was very overweight, so it made me thinking that he was eating constantly at nice places.
Oh, and taking other ladies out.
Or maybe he was, because he always, now that you say that, anytime we would go out to eat, he was flirting with the waitresses, always. In front of me, always.
So, and you're like, what were you thinking, Debbie?
I don't know.
I'm just kidding.
I don't know what I was thinking.
Well, you had 2 young children, too. You probably didn't have much time to think. No. Because they keep you so occupied. It's almost like a smoke screen. They just keep you occupied constantly, so you don't have time to look at your life and what's going on. You're totally focused on them.
Right. And, and I grew up in a very good home. I mean, my parents have been married now going on 52 years. They still tell each other every day, I love you. They still think each other is beautiful and good looking. I mean, they're in their 70s and they're still in love. And so that was the kind of atmosphere I grew up in. So this was like something totally new to me. So maybe I was naive in a lot of ways and not really understanding.
20 years old.
Right.
We haven't been out much.
Exactly.
And these guys are very good, because I'm just looking at my past, too. They know exactly what they're doing.
They do. You're right.
And it's just
they know how to mind game you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's about brainwashing and all kinds of freaky things that they're doing. So at this time, how did he treat the kids? Because they were pretty young.
Well, let's get to, I guess my son maybe was 12 years old at the time, and that's when he really started demanding things of my son, like coming out and doing physical work, digging ditches and building fences and building buildings and all this. Okay, the kid's 12 years old. And I understand, yes, kids do need to do chores around the house. I am all for that, because I did chores when I was growing up, and kids do need to do chores around the house. But I think he was just going a little too far, because my son was not a construction worker, and he was expecting my son to do construction as if he had all this experience. And this went on. My son, I say, till he was 15, and then my son finally
got mad.
Yeah, he did, and he actually would kind of start saying things to his dad, like, "Look, Dad, this is too hard," and he would just have these outbursts. "I don't care. You're going to do it the way I want it," and cussing at my son and all this other stuff. By that time, my daughter was a little older, and then he started expecting things of her, too. I mean, literally, I had horses, and we were building a small barn out back, and he was expecting the kids to build a barn and build a fence and do all this stuff. And
he was working those kids hard.
And like I said, I understand. Right. Right, and they were starting to protest.
So then what happened because they were getting bigger, and of course your son being a guy, too, I'm sure he grew in size, too.
Right.
A teenager, too, of course.
Right, and then when my son started getting a little bit older, 16, 17, they started actually getting into physical fights. I mean, really physical fights.
Okay.
And then, of course, me as the mom, jumping in there, trying to break them up. And then my daughter, she would see it, and she'd start getting upset. And then, then it would turn into, then all of a sudden, he and I were screaming at each other. And then it just started evolving to the point where it was
just a big blow up.
Yeah, it was a big blow up.
Everybody involved.
And then it started becoming every day that this would start happening every day. Mind you, I had moved out of the bedroom onto the couch because I just couldn't tolerate being with him, and just then verbally abusing me, saying things to me, calling me names. I mean, it was just
playing
awful. Playing mind games.
But
constantly.
He never did any physical.
He didn't do anything to me physically.
And not the kids either.
Now he and my son would get into it, And then my daughter started having to get in the middle of breaking them up. And
so,
then
yeah, not a good situation.
yeah, not a good situation. And then it started where the cops were being called. And within a span of...
Who called the cops? Did you guys or neighbors or who?
The ex started calling the cops because my son wasn't doing what he wanted to do.
Oh.
So he was using the cops as a way to try to get my son to do chores. And the
How
cops,
did that work out?
The cops shook their head and thought this was ridiculous, you know, and they would say, we cannot come out here and make your son do chores. And it got ridiculous. Within a span of, I'd say, 4 months, the cops been to a house 20 times.
Oh my goodness.
They had been called to our house, either by the kids and I or by him. And the cops just, you know, they were shaking their head like, this is ridiculous. Well,
yeah, that's no way to live.
no, it isn't. And then in 2007, let's see, October of 2007, I had started feeling like a pain under my left breast. I had come home and I was going into the mailbox and I thought, you know, that kind of didn't feel right, but then it went away and I didn't think about it. Well, then 2 days later, I felt the pain again. I thought, okay, something wasn't right. So I go into the restroom at home, and then I started feeling in the area where the pain was, and I found a lump. I found a lump, and it was pretty large. And the ex was in the bedroom at the time, and I started crying. And
did you tell him?
Well, yeah. When I was crying, he's like, "Why are you crying?" And I told him, I said, "I found a lump." And he's like, "Well, I don't understand why you're crying. You don't know if it's cancer." But I just knew in my heart. I just knew it. So, you know, he was very cold about it. You know, I don't understand why you're crying, which was a normal thing, you know, stop crying. Very, very mean to me. But anyway, so I called the doctor the next day, and they got me in the following day and did a, you know, just a physical check, and I had all the classic signs of breast cancer. So they set me up for a biopsy, and then I had my biopsy November 2nd of 2007, and it was a needle biopsy, and I could see the screen because they did it via sonogram, and so I could kind of see what the doctor was doing, and he even looked at me, and he had this look on his face, and he said, "I'm not going to pull any punches with you," he said, "but I really think it's cancer." And he explained to me.
It wasn't looking good at the time.
No, and he explained to me if it was just a cyst, and he showed me the screen, he said light would come through the cyst, and you could see the light. He said, but with a mass, it's shadowed under there, and that's what made him think that it was a mass.
So they diagnosed you with breast
cancer. I had to wait 5 days for them to come out with the diagnosis, and they called me, and they said, yes, it is positive for cancer. Well, my ex was out in the pasture cutting grass, mad at my son, of course, again. So he was out there cutting the grass, and I was at that time crying because of the news. And
so how did he take the news?
Well,
supported?
Well, no.
that was a dumb question.
Yeah, exactly.
To ask it. Yeah.
Well, he turned off the lawnmower, and he says again, "Why are you crying?" with a very stern, you know, look on his face. And I said, they called me and they said it was cancer. He didn't say a word. He just turned around, turned on the lawnmower, and started cutting grass again.
So he was very concerned.
So how do you think that made me feel, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to say that word, but...
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now we get that saved, so we don't have to worry about that. Go ahead.
So my daughter was in 9th grade at the time, and when she came home, you know, I gave her the news, and she didn't cry. I think it was her way of handling it.
She wasn't very old.
Yeah, she wasn't very old at the time, and you know, I told my son about it, and he was a little more supportive. So in December, I started my chemo treatments. I had rounds of 8, so 4 of the first medicines, which the doctor said he was going to hit it hard and heavy, and he did. And by the 3rd round, it was awful. I was so sick.
And it was chemo?
It was chemo. I couldn't get out of bed. I'd have my chemo treatment on a Thursday, and I would barely get out of bed starting on that Tuesday. And I had rounds every other week. So by the time I would start feeling better,
It's time for the
it
next
was time for the next
Yeah.
one. I was getting sores in my mouth. I couldn't eat or anything, and
Yeah.
I was so sick. And I remember the third one, I called my parents, and my mom answered the phone. I was crying, and all I wanted was my daddy. I said, Mama, can I talk to Daddy? And so she put him on the phone. I said, Daddy, I can't do this anymore. I was just crying, and he said, you know, you have to. What's your alternative? So he was a huge supporter.
Mm-hmm.
And my Uncle Joey, which he passed, but my Uncle Joey was a huge supporter.
So you had some family.
I definitely. And my Uncle Joey, he would send me cards all the time. He was a very devout Catholic, and he would send me little pictures of Mary. He would send me rosaries. He put me on all the prayer lists of all the Catholic churches. So that really helped me know, and this kind of helped me with my breakthrough.
But your husband was
he was not supportive.
Your ex-husband, I should say.
Yeah, he was not supportive. In fact, the screaming, yelling continued between him and my son and the kids. The cops were called out.
Constantly while you were going through
constantly.
chemo.
And one of the cops, I think he finally opened my eyes when he looked at me and he said, there's no winning with this guy, talking about my ex. My ex was belligerent with the cops too. She said, there's no winning. And he said, can I be honest with you? He said, you would be better off getting divorced.
The cop said that
to you? Said that to me.
When you were in the middle of
when I was in the
treatment.
And he said, you know, and he told my son and my ex, he said, you know, it's pretty ridiculous that you have a sick lady here and you can't get along.
So when he said that to you,
it just kind of thought, you know what? He's right. He's right.
That could be like somebody being very honest. It's like a
he
wake-up
was,
call.
and he was an outsider, so he knew.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got through all my chemo treatments. I started in December. I finished them in March. In April, I had a lumpectomy. I was trying to save the breast. The margins weren't clear, meaning there were still chances of cancer. So I had a mastectomy. That was in May of 2008. I started radiation in September of 2008. So I got through all that.
So how were you feeling physically at this time? Because it was going on, and then your husband was obviously acting out the whole time.
It was
between
terrible.
Your kids too.
It was terrible. And, you know, and I had lost my hair, of course, you know, with the chemo and crying, and he wasn't supportive of that. My son was. My son pulled a chair next to me in the bed when I was crying, and he held my hand. He said, Mom, you're still beautiful. You're still my mom.
Yes, just hair. We got wigs for that.
Exactly.
It'll grow out also.
He said, you know, he came to all my chemo treatments with me. I had to have blood transfusions because my blood count was low. He came to, so my son was like my big supporter.
Not your husband, yeah.
Yeah, my son was, and my son was 19 at the time. So that kind of helped me get through it. My dad definitely, my Uncle Joey, and then when that cop said, you'll be better off, you know. So I went back to work in November of 2008.
So this is about a year,
almost
a year
after
you were diagnosed.
Well, I was diagnosed November 2nd of 2007. November 3rd, 2008, I went back to work. So yeah, that was a year.
Yeah,
that was a year.
I mean, is that pretty quick?
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty much. It was pretty quick. It was pretty quick, and I was feeling good.
Under the circumstances too, with all the chaos in the house.
Exactly. Well, I got back to work, and in January 2009, I said, you know what, this is my year. I knew that it was my year. I was gonna have a change. I just knew it. I didn't know how, you know, and my faith really helped me get through it all. And I just prayed and prayed and prayed, and finally, you know, things were still terrible. In May of 2009, my husband got arrested and went to jail because of the domestic abuse. He actually it happened twice. His friend got him out both times because I wasn't going to get him out. I was going to leave him there. Then my son ended up going to jail because of that. My daughter got into the wrong crowd at school. She started smoking marijuana. She got into jail. So 2009 was horrible. And I was at the lowest.
And you're trying to recuperate.
Right, trying to recuperate. And by July of 2009, I was just my lowest. That was my total breaking point, I have never been so down in my life. And you know what my son told me, he said, Mom, he said, sometimes God just breaks you down to just bring you back up, to totally build you back up again. And at the time I couldn't see it, but then I realized it because my son knew that I needed to build myself back up again. So by October 2009, I just had enough. And my ex-husband and I were having a fight, and I was screaming, looked at him in his face, and I said, I want a divorce. He had this look of bewilderment on his face because I finally just stood up to him. I had enough. And believe it or not, he was calm. And he said, okay. And I was totally shocked, totally shocked. So we were going through all the proceedings and all that. And by this time, my graduating class was getting back together, and everybody was friending everybody on Facebook. And then my now husband and I connected back, and we were just kind of talking a little bit. And after my divorce was final, we started talking a little more. And then I went
to the one in Houston, or
yeah,
the graduating was in Houston.
Right, he was in Houston. I knew him in school and everything like that. And then so we ended up getting married in August of 2010. So we're getting ready to celebrate 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have my own business now, and things are going great. I ended up moving to Houston to get away from the ex. My kids.
Is he still in Atlanta?
Yeah, he's still in Atlanta.
So he moved out, and y'all settled the divorce, and,
right.
And without problems there?
Yeah, without problems. Well, actually, I did, to kind of back up a little bit, I was kind of a nice person and let him stay in the house for a couple of months until he found the abuse. He continued to be verbally abusive to a point I had to get him.
You allowed him to stay in the house?
Yeah, I know. Can you believe that?
We're just too nice.
Right, and then I had to get him physically thrown out. And we're frozen again.
And we're frozen again?
I'm almost done. Like 2 minutes.
I just want to say.
I'll say now.
Oh, good. Let's pop that down.
Yep.
So we don't.
Why is it?
Don't know. Well, at least if we can save it here.
So I had to actually go to a protective agency and get a temporary protective order against him. And the cops had to physically come to the house, serve him. When I wasn't there, allowed him to get personal things out. We had to go to the court, arrange a time where he can get the rest of his personal belongings. So that was 2 days before Christmas.
Merry Christmas to him.
Merry Christmas to me. I was so happy. I was just so happy. And I don't like divorce, but for me, 22 years of going through all that, I was ready. I was done. And then my husband and I started, my now husband and I, love you, honey, started communicating more and visiting each other and all that. And like I said, then in August 2010, we got married. I actually moved back to Houston in June. Mm-hmm. Then we got married in August. So almost 5 years now, and doing well.
Yeah, they would. Hey,
cancer-free for 7 years.
Hey.
Yay!
So where the kids, are they here in Houston area also?
Yeah, the kids.
Yeah, they moved with you.
They moved with me. My daughter she's doing well. She's working and going to school, and my son's working. So they're both out of the house, kind of doing their own thing. They still call mom all the time, and my son's literally within walking distance. And and I tell him, how much I appreciate him supporting me. So for those that are going through breast cancer, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and just hang on to those that do want to help you. I know sometimes it's hard because you don't want to feel helpless. I was that way to a point, and then my son just said, Mom, let me help you. So just hold on to that one that does want to help you.
So how is their contact with their father? I mean, do they stay in touch with
Believe it or
each
not,
other?
they do. And actually, after the divorce, my daughter was 16 at the time, and she moved with me first, and my son later. But I told both of them when I divorced, I said, it's totally up to you. If you want a relationship with your dad, that's up to you. I mean, they were very bitter, very angry. They still have a lot of their anger issues they're trying to work out. So for those of you that are staying together just because of the kids, sometimes it's not the best thing. Because my kids do have some emotional problems. They do.
Yeah, they pick up on the energy in the house.
Right.
Absolutely. If you think that they don't. Because kids will pick up on anything.
Right. And unfortunately, they saw a lot of our arguments, and they were exposed to too much at too young of an age, especially they were at very impressionable ages.
Yeah, they don't understand. A lot of times they blame themselves. So.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably some work, but they do stay in contact with your ex, and
they do,
works out pretty good.
Yeah, and again, I just told them that's your deal. And actually, can you believe last year my ex sent me a letter, saying I forgive you. I don't know what he's supposed to forgive me for, but he actually had it in his mind, just to kind of show you where his mindset is. He had it in his mind that, basically to boil it down, that I was just kind of having a fling kind of thing, and that it was time for me to come home and to be with him and have our family put back together again. And I thought, excuse me, I'm married. So I let my husband read the letter, and I said, do you want a good laugh? And we both had a good chuckle about it.
But he doesn't bother you or anything like that?
No, I mean, he tried to at first because my daughter was still a minor, and he tried to start some stuff at first, of course. And I told him, I think he realized that I'm strong now. I had to find my strength, and through cancer, I did have to find my strength. I had to find it in order to not only survive the cancer, but to survive in general, to get away from that situation. And fortunately, it worked out that my husband was here in Houston, so it made sense for me to move here and just totally start a new life and just to get away. So.
Yeah, sometimes it's just no contact, just get away. And if you don't have to stay in contact because of the kids anymore, they can stay in contact.
Right.
There's no problem there, but for you, it's better a lot of times just leave it alone.
Just to leave it alone, exactly. So.
And let them do whatever they want to do.
Right.
Whoever they want to do.
Exactly.
So it's easiest, and put that behind you. Learn from it.
You do.
Yeah, but you have to cut the past loose too, because otherwise it's going to affect you in the present and also in the future if you hang on to all the bad stuff. So.
Right. And actually my husband now, he encouraged me when we first got married to actually write my story. So if you would like to read the full story, it's on my blog. Just go to my website, www.adamesgifts.com, and you could read it on my blog. And actually my daughter had to do a special essay in school, and she wrote her side of how she felt when I was going through breast cancer. So please visit it and take a look at it, and you can read my whole story and read my daughter's story too.
All right, there we have it. So, well, thank you, Debbie, so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. Sharing a story about, domestic abuse and your breast cancer, and to show women out there that if you are in an abusive situation, just, it's probably better to get out and with the kids, and you're at a no-win situation there most of the time, and you can survive and you can make it.
You can.
Breast cancer too, that made it hard on you, having to be in that, and we're frozen.
Right.
To be in that, I gotta wave my hand. And then it's like, okay. It's hard to heal under those circumstances.
Right.
And they know that, so they're trying to get the attention onto themselves. So.
Right.
But anyway, yes, we're sharing, and here you are today, looking great and feeling good.
Yes, thank you.
That there is hope for all of us. So we're going to just finish to say that, sometimes in life we do get stuck, and after being stuck a while, we do break down, but we can get unstuck, and we can learn from the past, so we can move into the present and the future, and we will have a breakthrough. And learn that, you learn from it and move on, and don't repeat it, right?
Right, yeah, that's the important thing. Don't repeat
Don't repeat that. Learn the lesson, and 22 years of that, yes. And the breast cancer, that's great, gives a lot of other women hope, because I think breast cancer is probably on the rise.
Yes.
I mean, the environmental things. And
yeah,
also
they say 1 in 8 women get diagnosed with breast cancer every year. So.
And also, too, when you're in the situation that goes on, I think a lot of times that cancer will just get worse.
Right.
And when you're in a domestic situation.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I had the double whammy. I had fighting breast cancer and fighting with my ex, fighting to keep my family together, fighting to keep my sanity. It was difficult. It really was.
But someone had to do it. Might as well be you, Debbie.
I guess it was the one. I was the chosen one.
See, that's stamped on your butt when you were born, girl. So anyway, she was the chosen one to fight it, and now she is here to tell us about it. So thank you so much for watching this episode. And we're women empowering women, and today was Debbie that's empowering us and inspiring us. So thanks again for watching this episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.